One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the air grew crisp, Michael approached his front door and noticed a piece of paper flapping in the breeze. Taped haphazardly, it looked official. He felt a pang of worry as he peeled it off and read the bold letters at the top. Notice of Violation. Willow Creek Homeowners Association. His heart sank. He hadn't even lived here 6 months, and already trouble was knocking. His eyes darted down the page, and his brow furrowed in disbelief. Dear Mr. Thompson, it has come to our attention that you are using the driveway in front of your property for parking and other activities. As per the community guidelines, this space is deemed common area and incurs a monthly fee of $150. Failure to comply will result in further penalties, including towing and legal action. Sincerely, Karen Whitmore, President of Willow Creek HOA. Michael's jaw tightened, his fingers crumpling the paper's edge. A fee? For using his own driveway? He knew for a fact that the driveway was included in his property line. He'd checked the deed meticulously before buying the house. He could still remember the joy of closing the deal, knowing he was securing a safe, happy home for Emily. He stormed to the mailbox, his pulse quickening, and found another envelope bearing the HOA's logo. Inside was an invoice demanding $450 for 3 months of driveway usage fees. The absurdity of it stung like a slap to the face. It felt like a shakedown, plain and simple. Who charges someone for using their own driveway? His mind raced with questions. How could this be legal? Why wasn't he informed of any such rule? And who was this Karen Whitmore to dictate how he used his own property? Determined to get answers, he decided to confront her the next day. The following afternoon, Michael found Karen by the community garden, clipboard in hand, and a self-satisfied grin plastered on her face. She was meticulously inspecting the flower beds, barking orders at a landscaper who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Karen," Michael called, his voice firm. "We need to talk." She turned slowly, her eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and condescension. "Oh, Michael, settling in all right?" He held up the notice and invoice. "What's this about charging me for my own driveway? There has to be some mistake." Karen's smile widened, a patronizing chuckle escaping her lips. "Oh, Michael, you must be new here. In Willow Creek, all driveways are technically common areas. It's in the amended guidelines." Michael's heart skipped a beat. "I never agreed to that. When was this amendment made?" Karen's eyes sparkled with a perverse sense of satisfaction. "It was approved before you moved in. It's not my fault you didn't read the fine print. All homeowners are expected to comply." Michael's stomach churned with anger. "That's ridiculous. I checked my deed. The driveway is on my property line." Karen's demeanor hardened. Her voice dropped to an icy, authoritative tone. "Listen, Michael. Around here, we follow the HOA's rules. Pay the fees or face penalties. It's that simple." She turned on her heel and strutted away, clipboard clutched like a weapon of control. Michael stood there, fists clenched, watching her figure shrink in the distance. His sanctuary was under attack, and the threat wasn't just some paperwork, it was Karen. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Karen wasn't enforcing rules, she was exploiting them. And if she thought he would roll over without a fight, she was sorely mistaken. Michael couldn't shake the anger burning inside him. The thought of paying for the right to use his own driveway was absurd, and Karen's smug grin haunted him. Determined to fight back, he decided to dig deeper. Late into the night, his dining table became a sea of papers as he sifted through every document he received when buying the house. Property deeds, mortgage agreements, HOA covenants. He read each page with a meticulous eye. But no matter how hard he looked, there was nothing about his driveway being a common area. His pulse quickened with hope, but hope wasn't enough. Michael needed undeniable proof. The next morning he drove to the county recorder's office, a dull gray building that smelled of dust and old paper. The clerk, an elderly man with wire-rimmed glasses, handed him a copy of his property deed. Michael's eyes scanned the document, his heart racing. There it was, clear as day. His driveway was within his property line. It was his, legally and undeniably. He couldn't help but smile, feeling a surge of confidence. Karen didn't stand a chance. That evening, Michael attended the monthly homeowners meeting, determined to confront Karen. The room was filled with neighbors who whispered in hushed tones, their faces tense with anxiety. Karen stood at the front, her posture rigid, exuding an air of authority. She spoke with rehearsed charm, her words dripping with false concern for the community's well-being. Michael felt his blood boil. When she opened the floor for questions, he seized the moment. "Karen, I checked the deed. The driveway is on my property. You have no right to charge me for using it." Karen's face didn't falter. She barely looked up from her clipboard, her voice cold and dismissive. "I'm not interested in what the county says. Here in Willow Creek, I make the rules." The room went silent. Michael looked around, hoping for support, but the residents avoided his gaze, their faces pale with fear. He realized then that Karen's power went beyond rules. She ruled through intimidation. Michael refused to back down. "Show me the amendment," he demanded. "I want to see where it says you can charge me for my own property." Karen's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a condescending smirk. "Fine. But until then, you'll continue to receive invoices, and if you don't pay, expect a lien on your house." The words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. A lien could ruin his credit, jeopardize his home, everything he worked so hard for. He felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the extent of Karen's control. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was weaponizing them. But Karen didn't know who she was dealing with. Michael wasn't just a software engineer. He also had a law degree. He had spent years studying contracts, property rights, and legal loopholes. If Karen wanted a fight, she would get one. Leaving the meeting, Michael's anger solidified into resolve. He needed to know how far Karen's corruption went. He started talking to neighbors, piecing together a disturbing pattern. One by one, they shared their stories, their voices trembling as they recounted Karen's extortion. An elderly woman, Mrs. Jenkins, revealed that she had paid over $2,000 in garden maintenance fees, even though she didn't use the community garden. Her hands shook as she described Karen's threats of eviction if she refused to comply. She told me I'd be homeless," Mrs. Jenkins whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. Michael's chest tightened with fury. This wasn't just about his driveway. It was about justice. Karen had bullied and exploited an entire community, preying on their fear. His decision was made. It was time to take action. Michael began gathering evidence. Letters, invoices, testimonies, all proof of Karen's abuse of power. He knew he was up against a cunning manipulator, but he wasn't alone. For the first time, the community had hope, and Michael was ready to lead the fight. As he stood on his driveway that night, the old oak tree casting shadows on the pavement, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was his home, his sanctuary, and no one, not even Karen, would take that away from him. Michael knew that if he was going to take down Karen, he needed solid evidence. Not just words or complaints. He needed irrefutable proof of her corruption. And he knew exactly where to find it. HOA financial records were public by law, and Karen was legally obligated to provide them. But of course, nothing was ever that simple with her. When Michael formally requested the documents, Karen's reaction was as predictable as it was infuriating. Her mouth tightened, eyes narrowing as she hissed, "Those records are confidential. You have no right to see them." Her defiance was almost laughable, but Michael didn't find it amusing. He could see right through her facade. She was hiding something, and the more she resisted, the more certain he became. Unfazed, Michael filed an official request under the state's Homeowners Association Act, a law she couldn't ignore. A week later, Karen grudgingly handed over a stack of files, her face twisted in contempt. Her fingers gripped the folders so tightly that her knuckles turned white, and for a brief moment, Michael saw panic flicker in her eyes. "You're wasting your time," she sneered. "Everything's in order." But Michael knew better. He could smell the fear behind her bravado. That night, his dining room transformed into a makeshift investigation headquarters. Papers were scattered across the table, highlighted notes littered the floor, and his laptop hummed with spreadsheets. Michael pored over every page, his eyes burning from hours of reading under the dim glow of the kitchen lamp. The numbers didn't add up. Expenses were inflated, funds were misallocated, and mysterious administrative fees were funneled into an account that didn't belong to the HOA. Michael's heart raced as the truth came into focus. Karen was siphoning money from the community. The driveway usage fees were just the latest in a long list of scams. She had been charging residents for non-existent services, creating bogus penalties and pocketing the cash. Michael could hardly believe the extent of her greed. This wasn't just corruption. It was theft, plain and simple. He knew he had enough evidence to expose her, but Karen was cunning. He needed to be strategic, precise, and above all, careful. One wrong move, and she'd destroy the evidence, leaving him with nothing. Michael needed an ally, someone who could outsmart Karen and navigate the legal minefield ahead. That's when he called Sarah Nguyen. They met in law school, and she was a fierce litigator known for dismantling corrupt organizations. If anyone could help him bring Karen down, it was Sarah. They met at a small cafe, their conversation intense and hushed as they outlined their strategy. Together, they built an airtight case. Sarah dug deeper into the financial records, uncovering hidden accounts and transactions traced back to Karen's personal bank. They gathered testimonies from neighbors, each more heartbreaking than the last, stories of extortion, threats, and financial ruin. But the real smoking gun came when Sarah found emails Karen had carelessly sent from her HOA account. In them, she bragged about her schemes, even mocking the residents as too dumb to read the fine print. Michael's hands shook with anger as he read the words. Karen's cruelty was worse than he'd imagined. They had everything they needed. The evidence was overwhelming: financial discrepancies, testimonies, and Karen's own arrogant confessions. But Michael knew better than to confront her directly. Karen was dangerous, manipulative, and shameless. She wouldn't hesitate to retaliate if she felt cornered. They had to be smart. One calculated move to topple her empire of lies. The trap was set. Michael and Sarah just needed the right moment to spring it. And when that moment came, Karen would finally pay for everything she'd done. The community hall buzzed with whispers as Michael and Sarah entered, armed with thick folders of evidence. Karen sat at the head of the table, exuding her usual arrogance, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Well, well," she sneered. "Here to pay up, Michael? Smart choice." Michael's expression remained calm. "Not quite. I'm here to inform you that your reign of extortion is over." He handed her a manila envelope, his confidence unshaken. Karen's face paled as she flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. Michael's voice was steady, unwavering. "You've been charging illegal fees, falsifying documents, and stealing from the community. And I have all the proof right here." Gasps filled the room. Sarah stepped forward, her voice firm. "Under state law, your actions constitute fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of power. You'll be facing civil and criminal charges." Karen's composure crumbled. You can't do this. Oh, I can. And I did, Michael replied. I'm a lawyer, Karen. You messed with the wrong person. Security escorted Karen out of the room, her power shattered. The board voted unanimously to remove her from office, and an audit was ordered to restore the stolen funds. Weeks later, Michael received a letter from the new HOA board with a full refund for every cent Karen had wrongfully taken. Neighbors approached him with gratitude, relieved that her tyranny was finally over. Standing on his driveway, Michael watched Emily rollerblade under the old oak tree, her laughter echoing through the air. The driveway was his, not just on paper, but in every sense of the word. Karen learned the hard way. No one is above the law, especially not on a lawyer's driveway.